back. Dynasty Theory. It's Tuesday night. Was it last week we were on Wednesday? Was it?
Maybe, probably. More than likely.
I go into work today, and this happens. That kind of reminds me. It happens every single week. Hey, John, like, how was your weekend? What'd you do? I'm like, I can't remember. Everything just blends together at this point. But what I do remember is we're joined by Cowboys faithful Dan Lamagna. Big week for you, buddy. What's up, Dan?
Man, I want to open tonight talking about two teams in these opening thoughts. The first, how about them Cowboys? Surprise, right? Beating the GOAT, winning a road playoff game on grass, or whoever made up that wacky storyline. But, extended my season another week, and now it's Niners revenge game Sunday. So stoked there. I appreciate my listeners just humoring me and my Cowboy fandom and you gentlemen, of course. But the second team I want to talk about is the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mitch. Why do I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers? Because our co-host here, the man himself, did not share with his football family that Nicole Bauer is now the growth marketing manager for the Pittsburgh Steelers. John, holy cow, man.
And for the record, to clarify, most people, that's my sister, not my wife. That the confusion there's been some confusion on random tweets. I remember the one time we were on a thread together and somebody was like, "Oh, your wife." And my sister texted me, was like, "This is so scarring right now." She's marketing, growth manager or something or other. She's really excited.
That's cool. That's
so hopefully shortly, you'll have a new voice to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know. Is that
work it, man?
Nepotism?
Work it. Like, I am hashtag jealous here. Like, I don't know. One, again, I think Mitch and we should be mad at you because Mitch, I don't know, maybe you had a side conversation, but
no idea.
I don't remember getting this news other than stumbling across it on LinkedIn tonight. And then I bust John and he shares the Twitter post as well. But like I would be the chief bottle washer if the Cowboys would let me and my wife would move to Texas. It doesn't matter. Never mind the growth marketing manager. That sounds so cool.
Yeah, she's awesome. Excited. She's excited. So
congrats, man.
I'll let her
Congrats
know about the shout out because she might have missed this week's episode of Dynasty Theory. I know she usually tunes in. What's up, Mitch?
More importantly, 4 days I'm in Cancun. I mean, that's the important thing right now. I never realized how long a week could be until you're like a week out from a vacation you've been waiting for a year. This week has taken forever.
Are the kids going with you?
Nope. Kids are staying home. First time in 7 years we're doing something without the kids.
Sweet.
Chef's kiss. And you told your wife that you're going to do the pivot point Saturday and Saturday?
I tried. She told me she's taking my phone. So it's probably not going to happen.
I don't blame you. That's going to be a blast. Hopefully you enjoy. And I'm sure you will. Dan and I will hold down the fort. And then I'm actually going to have this Saturday on the pivot point, one of our patrons, Ronnie Cavalier,
nice.
Ron's Reactions, is going to be joining me on the pivot point. So that's going to be exciting. That's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking about his tiers. And I'm going to challenge him. Good. On nothing specific. I haven't really dove in yet, but I'm gonna have some brain busters there for him. Anyway, enough of the chit chat, enough of the small talk. Startup season is officially upon us for many more in the Dynasty community than when we first kicked off conversations in November. Again, absolute psychopaths in the Dynasty Theory Patreon. But we have some information, we have some data now. Different startups. That comment's for our boy Ron for the pivot point. Now load them up, John. Load them up. That'll be fun. Anyway, so we have some data now, starting with the startups that took place in November, end of November. And I collected 6 or 7 startups based on what people in the Discord provided. And some of them, you look at it, and it's like, okay, this is a Dynasty Theory Patreon startup. There's 47 quarterbacks in the first 46 picks. Situations, obviously, that would be wild. But situations where it kind of blends in with overall thoughts and opinions and values that we've discussed regularly. But then a lot of the startups that were shared had random people in there. And you could kind of see the varying viewpoints and how they strayed from the overall and overarching strategies that we discuss on a weekly basis. So we'll be going through those, some specific players, but overall, and Mitch, you mentioned this, and I think it's a fantastic idea, keeping this as evergreen as possible. It's a startup episode. You can listen to it today. You can listen to it in April, and hopefully a lot of the overarching strategies and discussions carry over to August and early September. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you're going to me. Sorry. I was halfway listening to my kids screaming upstairs, like pounding on the floor. I'm like, well, hopefully one of them's alive. Only one. I don't need both by the end of the show. But no, it's a big thing for me. I think when we go into Dynasty strategy, I will go back. We had a podcast way back in the Fantasy Confidential days. We had someone come on who like thinks of themselves as a best ball savant, right? My question to them, I was like, hey, what is your strategy in best ball? And they're like, I collect value. And I'm like, that's just fantastic. That helps so much. So, but I think a lot of people fall in that trap with Dynasty too. They're like, well, yeah, you just pick the best players. I think in Dynasty, picking the best players isn't like the best way to go. You need to be able to build your team and build a roster that's either, if you end up with an average team after Dynasty startup, you probably did it wrong. You either want to go try to win a little bit more or try to lose a little bit more. But if you're going in there as the 6th place team, odds are you probably are going to finish the 6th place team. So I think there's different ways to go about it.
Yeah, and it's certainly there are the varying approaches, and we always talk about this, but if you have a larger portfolio, it allows you to be a little bit more flexible and less focused on specific players and more general ideas. But also, hey, I'm going to go into the startup because of how my portfolio is laid out, how many teams that may be. I'm going to go in, and unless something crazy happens, I want to do a productive struggle. I want to rebuild from the start just because I can.
Mhm.
Or, hey, the way things have been going with my portfolio, I'm going to take a more win now approach, or I'm going to go with this build because maybe I don't have it. Or Roy, one of our patrons in the chat, in his early startup this offseason, it was a lower money buy-in, and he said, hey, I'm going to have fun and just really focus on players I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. And they're all different strategies that can pan out. But most importantly, I think it's just having fun with it. And I know it's very easy to get lost in, you want to be profitable. You want to make sound decisions. You want to have this big, grand, elaborate strategy. But ultimately, get the guys that are going to make it enjoyable for you. And I think that's important to take away going into any startup. Now, I'm not saying go in and be an absolute loser by any means, but
sometimes that's okay. It's really okay to do that.
It's okay. It's okay, but then it's not enjoyable. All right. But anyway, Dan, any thoughts here on the mumbo jumbo that we're throwing out right now before we get into real strategy talk?
When it was about midweek, I think, and John drops this massive spreadsheet on us in an email, comes up with this week's topic. And I had to have a little pep talk with myself, John, and psych myself out not to be overwhelmed, because it was probably in the middle of a work day when I was overwhelmed with the work day, and you send this massive spreadsheet. So this is me being a team player. As you know, I'm still playing like last season as it's NFL playoffs, but living vicariously through you, JB, and reading these analytics is you put something together that I think PFF would, or at least should be jealous of. Like this was very nice spreadsheet, but to offer true analysis after my pep talk and finally diving in, if I was doing a startup now, which I would have fun doing, don't get me wrong. Like I am in like startup mode as far as, looking at rookies and doing rankings and getting ready for drafts. I just like having more definitive answers before I draft my team. And that's just my style. You know what I mean? I just like knowing where, team, coaching situations are settled and who's calling plays and who's where. But the trends I'm seeing based on the information you shared, just a little touch on it right now, is there are bargains to be potentially had now based on views of certain players that I think are sliding already. Like there are guys that I have kind of formed an opinion on or projecting ahead to next year that I'm looking at your draft results and I'm like, ooh, this is nice. Like it almost gives me that itch to want to start up now, because it's like, can I really get him that late? And that's how I kind of form my team. But there is still a lot of uncertainty across the NFL for my true drafting pleasure.
So,
And
John,
this
really quick before we dive into strategy, I'm just going to say, like, if someone, typed in the Google machine, they're like, startup, oh, hey, there's a Dynasty podcast talking about startups. If you are looking to get into a Dynasty startup, join the Patreon, join the Discord. I think I counted there has been 8 that have started up in the last like 7 weeks. And I mean, we have, I think one just filled. There's another one filling right now. It's a constant stream of startups. And the nice thing about these leagues is they're ran by really good commissioners. And so you don't have to worry about the random sleeper leagues that, they might fold after a year. They're kind of fun, but these are actually really well-ran leagues. So I would say if you're looking for one, you're not sure where to go or where to look, our Discord's a really good place to start.
Not only that, I want to piggyback off of that. Sorry, Dan, before
okay.
I forget. Not only that, it's folks in the league overall. Yeah, there's going to be some playful jabs, I would say, which is fair, but it never crosses that line from what I've seen of disrespect. And it's because it is a community and a lot of the teams coming in, so maybe it's like, oh, Dan, what are you doing taking Dak there? But, I think that's something that's very intimidating for a lot of people that are looking to get into Dynasty and take part in startups. Hey, what are my league mates going to think if I make this trade? And it's easy to get lost in, I don't really know the value, so I'm just going to sit there and hang tight because I don't want, people to get pissy with me or judge me in any way. And with the startups also, before I pass it over to Dan, there are startups that took place that were $10. And then there were some that were 100.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, oh man, I'm not familiar with the format. I don't want to jump in at this price point. There's literally something for everybody.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, I just want to share that.
No, that was good. And same thing, just before you went into deep dive, I just wanted to be able to kind of put a disclaimer out there. And I think we offer good value to our listeners in that we do have 3 different kind of philosophies and it changes from season to season too. As much as we joke and I say, hey, I'm not like maybe like diving in right now, I'm still into it. Like, I mean, both of you guys push me every year earlier and earlier into studying for startups. So I'm not like Debbie Downer on this. I'm in. Like, I'm excited. Like, I honestly, as much as I joked about your spreadsheet, John, I was like, okay, this is helping my rankings and I'm getting a good jump on looking ahead to next year. But I think it's important to our listeners to know we're all genuine in what we're doing right now too. Like, I'd be fake if I just came on here and say, oh, I'm doing a startup today just to do it. I do like getting that more information, but I'm equally excited when I see on the Discord and I see all the different startup opportunities that were posted. And I saw this week, John, you've been asking people to share. And so we're giving our listeners a lot of choices and options. So, hey, if you're listening and you're starting now or you're starting later, that don't really matter. We're starting that good analysis to get us thinking. So whenever you're ready, we're here for you.
Well, to be honest with you, first and foremost, these spreadsheets aren't for you. They're not for our listeners. They're for me because I told you, I update you every week. We are here January 17th. I haven't done a startup yet. So collecting this data and this information allows me to at least see the trends. And that's going to be one of the big takeaways and conversations from tonight's episode. The trends that we're seeing early in the offseason, can we project? It's always difficult to project even 3 days out, but can we project 3 months out, 6 months out? Because that's where the real value is had.
So we know week to week, we're going to be studying and preparing and helping everybody whenever their startup is. But out of curiosity, when are you both, like, when do you think you're going to dive into startup? Have you thought about your off-season plan?
So for me, I'm not doing a lot of startups this year. I've decided I was just in too many leagues last year, so I'm not going to do a lot. But I'm sure I'll trickle into some. But a big thing is everyone in the Discord will post their startups. So I just watch their startups and I use those to gauge values. I'm like, hey, this player's going a lot higher than what I had him. Maybe now's a good time to try to trade him somewhere else.
And that's probably that is something that I will put together, and I'll base it off of the information I've started already. But going with similar formats, yeah, maybe one league's 1.5 PPR for tight ends, one's 1.75, but at least 12 team super flex tight end premium. Hey, here's 8 leagues. Here's the time that they drafted, the dates. Here is the range these players were taken. So if you're going in, Dan, and you're thinking, oh man, I wonder where Drake London is going in 12 team super flex tight end premium leagues. Well, here's a range. So you probably don't have to go above that. Certainly it's going to be difficult to go below that and really get value, but you can kind of see the range. You can see overall where they went each draft. But I think that, and that's kind of how we get to the ADP. But I think the range is really critical because that gives us a good idea of what we can expect draft to draft.
I like that a lot. And, I think myself, I was surprised. And I think we talked a little bit about this last year. We reevaluated what leagues we're in. Obviously we want to support our leagues. If for some reason we leave, we want to make sure we leave it in good shape so we don't hurt a league in anything like that. But I think surprisingly, I think I'm returning all 100% of my leagues this year, which is good. So, but maybe the negative side is that limits what I'm going to get into. I always try to find one really good one every year. So I'm sure I'll dive into one probably after the rookie draft for me, but we'll see. But like getting started tonight.
Yeah, a lot of good conversations going to take place tonight. This was like a long intro for us.
It was, yeah.
But still, like, after the small talk and pleasantries were exchanged to start the show, there's still conversations centered around startup topics in general. So trends, and this is kind of where I'm going to take it away. But trends, what we're seeing, and this really is no different from last year. And of course, I have limited data right now, so it's still anecdotal. That's always my go-to word. We have a limited sample size. Sample size is everything for me. It was actually in my vows to my wife. No, just kidding, of course. Maybe. But the quarterbacks, I filled with so many dumb jokes. I always wonder, like, do you think anybody, they ever like chuckle at anything I say, or they're like, this guy's an ass?
I chuckle. So there you
Thanks.
go.
More chuckles than the latter.
I'll take a pity chuckle. Anyway, so overall, we're seeing around 9 quarterbacks going in the first round of 12-team Superflex. And it really isn't a surprise. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence. So I think we just went up to 10. Those are guys that have consistently gone in the top 12, but a few of them slipping out depending on that rookie 101. That's crept up into the top 12. And I really, that's, it's been like those 13. Yeah. Even in tight end premium leagues, we are seeing a little bit of a shift, and it's the Kyle Pitts effect. People are hurt. The wounds are still fresh. They haven't healed quite yet. People don't want to invest early in the offseason, at least, in Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, because of what we see. I mean, there's question marks surrounding Lamar Jackson, but overall, the tight ends have bumped down a little bit. We were seeing Kyle Pitts go top 6, top 8 in Superflex startups that had a tight end premium. So that has changed a little bit. Like I mentioned, the rookie 101, there's, we're going to get into a little bit more later, but I think there are values to be had with some of the rookie picks. And basing it off of my tiers, where I have the tier breaks, luckily, everybody joined the party. Everybody declared that we were looking for. And Dan says, JB, get patience. I said, Dan, they got to declare today. The deadline is today, and you're preaching patience?
It was coming, JB. It was coming. They had to, make sure the NIL offers and compare that to the money they can make and when they go pro, and then, to take a little bit more of that limelight while they had the, the attention all to themselves. It made sense.
I do wonder if we're going to see players coming right down to the deadline, just seeing if any. I don't know how all that stuff works behind the scenes, but if Joe's automobile shop is making me an offer that I can't refuse, I got to stick around here one more year. But anyway, so there are some values to be had with the picks. The overall takeaway, I would say, is not just the quarterbacks, but once you get through the top 15 quarterbacks right now, there's a big dead zone. Mm-hmm. There is a big dead zone. So I think identifying where the opportunity is, that breaking point between, am I forcing a quarterback here just because I need a quarterback? and pushing other value down the board for my league mates, and I'm the opportunity cost of hand, it doesn't make sense. And some of these picks I'm looking at, and again, I don't say with any disrespect, but just as an observation, some of the picks, they really are eyebrow raisers. And you can say that about some of my picks, I'm sure. Dan?
Go back. You said a dead zone after top 15. Define dead zone. Because I'm just looking at my rankings now from the quarterbacks.
Massive gap in I think the safety, the caliber of play, the production, stability, where they are. So the top 15, they're going in those first 3 rounds typically. And then you're really not getting many more till about the 7th round. So you're seeing that big gap. So maybe you need a quarterback, but I wouldn't force it in like that 4th, 5th, 6th round just because you need one.
Gotcha. I mean, I look at just my quarterback rankings, and again, I haven't dove completely to see how the quarterback stretched out in your spreadsheet here, but like I'd make an argument you could probably go 20. I mean, just even going back to last year, I think it'll be similar.
I think you lose,
but there's some good production there. Now a little asterisk. I don't know what's happening with Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. I don't know where you put them in there because they're older than dirt. But but if they come back, they're going to produce again for your football teams. I mean, look how Daniel Jones panned out this year and Jared Goff. I think they've bumped themselves up into a category where I'd like to have them this year. And I'm sure there's going to be, Geno Smith bumped himself up. Kenny Pickett still, has promise and upside. And I think there's going to be a couple of new guys that are going to be the Danny Jones and Jared Goffs next year.
Sure, target them in the 7th or later.
Yeah. So the issue is this comes down to like your dynasty startup strategy. Are you going to fade them a little bit more so you could stock up with wide receivers? I'm still 100% firmly on I want 2 top 10 quarterbacks, because I can tell you, even the leagues that didn't make the playoffs or the teams that failed this year that have those 2 quarterbacks, I feel great with them moving forward. The ones that I kind of faded a little bit, maybe I went with a Derek Carr type who was the Jared Goff of last year, right? Or another quarterback like that. I don't feel as good. So for me, I'm still wanting to trade up and get those 2 quarterbacks. And there's 2 right now. Dak before last night was the guy that I was targeting. Now it's probably Trevor Lawrence. But you could get them instead of having to trade up in the top 8 of the first round in a startup. You could get them at the very start of the 2nd round turn. And if you could trade up there, it's so much cheaper than having to trade up into that first round. You're telling me I could start with, say, let's go Joe Burrow and Dak. I don't care what the rest of my team is. I know I'm set at that position. I could fill in elsewhere, especially if not having to pay that huge premium to try to get like a Mahomes and Hurts or Allen and Hurts or Allen Mahomes. That's a huge premium you have to pay. But if you could just get 2 of those top 10 guys so you don't have to worry about it moving forward, it's so huge. And the thing is, those guys just don't fall out. Like, who was the last one that really fell out of the top 10 that were like, oh, wow, maybe Kyler Murray, but there's always been questions with him. So outside of him, I think the top 10 is just so fairly set that you don't have to worry about losing so much value, even if you trade up and the guy has a bad season.
I love what you said, but is that really attainable? So
I do it in all my leagues.
Like I'm looking at my top 9. If you're looking at John's spreadsheet, like they're not going to make it. The second one's not going to make it to us, Mitch, in the 2nd round. Like if you and I are partnering right now,
yeah.
So you would have to trade up. You would 100%, have to. Yeah. So that's okay. So you're moving and shaking.
Right. That's the difference between like mine and John's strategy. John's always willing to trade back, and I'm more looking to trade up into the 1st, early 2nd. I mean, John's like, no, I trade up. Like, that one time you did it doesn't count, John.
That one time at band camp, I traded up. No, but so I think there's a few things here, a few takeaways. Do you, Mitch, and this is to you because you brought up the point. Do you think it is a better strategy from a cost perspective? So you have the 101, okay? And you go Patrick Mahomes. So now you're sitting there. It's 12-team league, no 3rd round reversal. You're sitting with a 212, 301, and so on and so forth. Would you prefer to do something involving that 212 plus for the 108, 109, 110, as opposed to the 212 plus to get up into that top 4 or 5.
Yeah, and so this is really depending, and this is why tiers matter so much and the players you like matter so much, right? So let's say Dak, after these playoffs, he starts going off higher, right? Let's say he's now the 7th pick in the draft or the 8th pick in the draft. He's a little bit harder to get. And Deshaun Watson is there at the 110. I want to trade above that 110 because I don't want Watson. He's just not a quarterback that I look to build with in Dynasty. He's not the guy I want. But if I know Dak's there at 109, then I'm willing to pay whatever it takes to get above that tier of quarterback so I'm not dropping down. And so that's the big break point for me. If I'm in the startup draft, I have an early quarterback, I get the quarterback that I like, I'm watching to see is who drops. And if Lamar Jackson drops to that 108, I'm firing on my bullets trying to get that 108. If someone's there at the 109, then I'm doing the same thing. But that's why you have to be super active in the first and second round of startups. Like, you could be a little bit less active when you get to the later rounds, but the first 2 rounds matter a ton. So you could get the good players that you like if you're willing to pay the price to get them.
Well, especially because typically that first trade, it sets the market in your league, right?
Mm-hmm. It does.
If you see, man, still not past this cough. If you see a complete overpay for a pick, then again, that sets the market. Whereas I hate when you are trying to trade back and somebody trades back before you for peanuts.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, there it goes. I got to make this pick. But what I've talked about also, changing things up more recently is I agree with you, Mitch, obviously having one of those anchor quarterbacks. We always talk about like anchor running back, but those anchor quarterbacks. And if you can get, and we talked about this with our quarterback episode last week, if you can get up into that group and, top 9, top 10, however you have your tiers broken down, once you hit that point, especially in a startup, I want to trade back. And we're going to talk about how much value is sitting there in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. It is like, it's crazy looking at the names here. And some of them more screaming buys for me personally than others, but still just to see some of the names and we'll go through it. And again, limited sample size with the number of drafts we have here, but still good information for a general gauge on these early offseason startups. All right, so trends, kind of talked about that. Early errors that we're seeing here. I think getting away from the quarterbacks, and I have this marked on my tiers, but players that have an asterisk, and this came up in the conversation in the Discord earlier today, they're players that I could see having a somewhat drastic value swing throughout the offseason. And those are the types of players, for the most part, depending on how I see that swing going, are the players that A, I either want to invest in at their current price, or B, I want to completely avoid. There's no in between. Those are going to be the players. And typically, for the most part, they're younger assets. And with the running back position, guys that have that higher cost to acquire, but their situation could drastically change, or the production could certainly fizzle out. So running backs, I think, are a little bit more common here. So the overall error, I would say, and this goes with roster construction and the way folks approach their startups, but investing in those higher end running backs, I would say anywhere in the top 12 that could see a situation change, but another asterisk here, because that situation changing, their value and production could completely take a hit. Right now, a player that fits that first part, but I don't think it fits the second, is somebody like Josh Jacobs. He's gotten down to like the 10 to 12 range, and he's done nothing but produce. And it's not like the Raiders were some ideal, fantastic situation. That very well could be production that we see no matter where he lands. Obviously, there's so many question marks. So I certainly would be okay if you like, I'm not taking him in the like the late second, obviously.
Mhm.
But we get into that late third, early fourth. I can get on board with my running backs there, and certainly depending on the ones we're looking at. But I think it's investing in those higher value running backs at a certain point when you have to kind of say, okay, maybe it's not worth it here to go this route and pivot to another position.
Well, I was waiting for Dan to chime in, but I got this. So one
Get it,
thing
Mitch.
I do worry about with a running back like Jacobs, it ends up being the 3rd to 4th round startup running backs, especially when they're a little bit older coming off a contract year. We've seen the Kenyon Drake go and get paid. And these are the backs that I end up see them failing on my team more than gaining value. And that's my biggest worry. And so looking in that 3rd and 4th round, I think it's time just to hammer a tight end that you like, to be honest. If you could get one that you like and then hit the running backs afterwards, because right now, a running back you could get in the 5th round. We talk about him a lot, but he's just there, and I just saw his name. DeAndre Swift is available in the 5th round of startups right now. You could go down. There's other guys in that same tier you could look for, but I think there's just such a tier break between the top 6 good tight ends and all the rest of the crap that's in the, good players, NFL football players in the league right now, that I just want one of those 6. You tell me, like, I have my tight end locked up, my starting quarterback's locked up after the first 4 rounds. I'm sitting pretty happy, especially if I could start to get some of those 2023 picks, depending on when you're drafting and if they're in the startup draft or not.
This kind of goes hand in hand. Obviously I mentioned Josh Jacobs and Mitch avoiding the running backs in the 3rd round, and perfect. I'm okay with that. Ideally, I don't want to make a pick in the 3rd or 4th round just because of the opportunity at hand with these players going even as far back as the 8th. Like, let's see here. Like a Josh Jacobs, for example. Okay. Would you prefer Josh Jacobs in the 5th or in the 8th? Let's say you get an 8th and 9th for that 5th. Would you prefer Josh Jacobs or Tony Pollard and Miles Sanders, or Tony Pollard and Jahan Dotson, or Tony Pollard in the 201, whatever the case may be? Give me the extra shot there, especially when we're talking about a situation when that running back I get in the 8th very well could outproduce that guy that I'm taking in the 5th round. So ideally, I'm moving back, and not just talking about the 1st and 2nd round, but that 3rd through 4th round. If I can move back and get the extra draft capital, overall, I see very little separation overall, and you're picking up the extra depth piece and extra ammunition to move throughout this offseason if an opportunity presents itself, throughout the regular season, whenever it rolls around. But, I think that's more of a, we could say error, but more just overall strategy that we're looking at.
Yeah, I see. You could definitely. I mean, it supports our theory of you. I think you have to just get those quarterbacks early, like you just, because there's no slide and you're not getting those elite quarterbacks later. But you could get some really stud running backs and receivers even. I like to build after I get that quarterback early. Boy, if I could get the Chase Lamb, Justin Jefferson, those elite receivers, that compared to the elite running backs, who, not that I don't love getting those elite running backs, I do, but just more susceptible to injury, more susceptible to a down year, not going to pay up for a Josh Jacobs, exactly as you describe. And even if it's, you don't want to be as patient to wait to the 8th. I mean, I'm seeing J.K. Dobbins here in the 6th, who I think, hey, squeaky wheel theory or whatever, he's going to be healthy. I think that's a good value there in the 6th round. Saquon Barkley, I just think that the Saquon disrespect's a little disturbing to me. For, I love McCaffrey and he's elite, but I don't think Saquon Barkley, now that he's healthy and a good coaching staff, is just like many rounds later, or maybe he should, but okay, hey, you guys take CMC. I'm going to be very happy getting Saquon Barkley later, or Travis Etienne, who you highlighted, JP. I mean, just so many options.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Again, and one of the many reasons that I like to move back, and I talk about this, and it's always one of my buzz phrases, I like to minimize that risk. I do. And by diversifying and splitting up those higher end assets, it does that because all of my eggs aren't in that Christian McCaffrey basket. McCaffrey going mid-second in 12-team Superflex right now. If I can move back to the late third, beginning of the fourth, get Barkley and throw a 6 my way, 108, Jameson Williams, sign me up. It just makes sense. So I think right now there are so many market inefficiencies because people are still adjusting a little bit from the point scoring season to now we're in the off season. So it's going to be very interesting to see how things adjust over time. And that's why I said to start the show, if we can get right now, whatever your tiers are, whatever your rankings are, your values, if we can look ahead and say, this is where, based on what we're expecting throughout the offseason, where this player is going to be in September, that's where the advantage is, because you're looking at these players, you know, like I said, Josh Jacobs in the late fifth here in startups. I think that's a discount overall. Devontae Smith in the sixth. What are we doing?
I have no idea.
Yeah, when I saw that one, I was like, woohoo, baby.
What? So I
Decent
expect
Devontae.
that to change with a larger sample size.
Mhm.
So again, I want to preface this, and we talked about it to kick off the show, that yes, this is data that's available from real startups, but keep in mind it's a limited sample size. As the offseason progresses, I'll be updating the information that is going to be a little bit more reliable and have a better sample size. And I just realized, I just saw the comment, Mitch's hair is looking fire tonight.
It's pretty
Mitch,
good.
Are you at the point now that you're paying our listeners to come in and give you compliments?
No, I mean, just sometimes your hair looks that good, and that's just, what happens. One thing I want to mention, and this is kind of a random thought about startups, but before I forget, it gets brought up in the Discord constantly. What are we paying for a future draft pick? Let's say the 24 draft picks are the ones that you could trade for, right? For me, it's always, I will sell mine for a 6, and then I will buy one for a mid-7th or later. So that's just how I go, because the reason why I bring it up, I'm looking at the spreadsheet right now. The rookie 106 is averaging about the 5th round as far as the 2023 draft picks, if you include the rookie picks in them. So that's, a 5th round value. And I think it's very easy to pick them up for 7th rounds, future draft pick for 7th rounders in most drafts. But if you could sell yours for a 6th, that's great, right? But like when I'm buying them, I want to buy one for a 7th.
Yeah, and I think, and you're right, the question does come up often. A few things to look at, depending on where you are in the draft. Sometimes, just sometimes, you can look at a league mate in what they've done up to that point, the moves they've made, their roster up to that point. We all want to say these picks are random, and for the most part, in a startup, that's fair, right? But sometimes you can make an educated guess. And I've had situations like that. We've always had situations like that where we're sitting there a year later and we have the 102 now on our roster because of a trade we made. So I think using your best judgment, evaluating the team that maybe is offering their 24 first. Again, if it's like right off the bat, somebody offering you their pick for a startup pick, you don't know, obviously. And they're being uber aggressive. So it's tough to tell. But I'm right there with you. Overall, and it happens every year, but this 24 class, it's being hyped up already.
Yep.
And what always makes the random picks so valuable is it could be that 101, 102, 103, 104. So where the 23 class compared to the 22 class, we have several guys that could have challenged for that 101 or 102 in that 22 class. This 24 class, I think to this point, I'm not saying it's going to necessarily do the same thing. It's going to be an exponential growth year over year, but I think it's going to have that top 5 or 6 guys that, especially in Superflex,
Oh yeah.
people are going to be drooling over. So because of that, you look at the value of these 24 firsts today, they're random for the most part. Obviously, in startups, in established leagues, very different. You can look at a team and say, I need their 24 first today, and I'll overpay for it because I've been in a league with this person for 5 years now. I have an idea of where it's going to be. But we're looking at the 7th round, rookie 112, rookie 111. I'll take a random 24 first over those 2 picks, not together, just separate. Rashad White, Damian Pierce, give me that random 24 first, because it's going to be a much more liquid asset, and you don't know what's going to happen with either of those running backs. So we talked about this. Was it on the Pivot Point, Mitch, which is exclusively on the Dynasty Theory Patreon, $5 a month? But we talked about the running backs that we're looking at early in the offseason, and it's the veterans that we feel okay, like Derrick Henry. His cost is deflated overall because he's a veteran. It's early offseason. He's going to be 29 years old. People don't want him. Well, I have a decent idea in terms of running backs, his usage next year, which is really tough to predict and project. But a Derrick Henry, a Dalvin Cook, so players like that. And it's staying away from those younger running backs with huge question marks. So, Dan, you no boots on the ground like Mitch. Obviously, you and I go in more with just the look from afar approach, and that's fine. Obviously we have the data here, and we can look at our tiers and our rankings and evaluate from there. But are you seeing, based on this limited information we have, any early errors that maybe you just, hey, somebody's taking part in the first startup, maybe avoid this?
Avoid as in taken too early. I mean, and I know you.
No. Not specific players yet. Just a general view. We talked about get those quarterbacks early. Maybe wait a little bit after that. We talked about the running backs a little bit. You talked about the stud receivers. Maybe the tight end position. How do you view that overall?
Actually, I would look at the receiver position, as I see like some of these elite receivers sliding a little more than I would think, compared to a year ago when everyone wanted those elite receivers. They seem to be drifting a little bit. So I hate to lose that. I just think receiver is a great position to build around, especially after you get your elite quarterback position in place. Maybe you're not as aggressive as Mitch with 2, but you get 1, and then you just make sure you're not neglecting number 2, but you want to get that elite receiver there. So that worries me about drifting a little bit. And then you mentioned the tight end. I don't know. I'm still going to ride Kelsey a little bit. I think he's like the Derrick Henry of the tight end position. I see he's, dipping a little more later second compared to he was late first, early second a year ago. So we must have aged him in a year. Kyle Pitts, I really struggle. I know you said not players, John, but I'm struggling a little with the tight end take there of Pitts being ahead of Kelsey. And I know you don't like where Kittle's going. So I'm very curious of the tight end value there. But, anyone that went earlier after that in the tight end position, the Goddards I see up there a little bit, Freiermuth. Again, I like our strategy of, hey, if you don't get the elite one, slide and take them later. So as I look at your early data here, and some of those tight ends are getting bumped a little bit, I'm wondering if that's too aggressive.
It's those middle, and not even middle, like once you get outside of Kelsey and Andrews for production, Pitts for the insulated value and the hype. After that, I don't like where Kittle's going. None of the other tight ends, I don't have any of them in green, as in players that, wow, that's a value. Njoku, I think he's a little too high, even in 2 PPR. Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet, Greg Dulcich, Darren Waller. So it is a theme here. We obviously name specific players, but you get into that tight end 8 to 12 range, that's certainly a tier that I seem to be lower on than consensus. And this is another situation. You have those one-off positions, those positions that have a little bit more scarcity. And once you get outside of those top guys, people force these picks a little bit, right? Hey, running backs, wide receivers, they're going, they're still sitting out there. Tight ends, they're flying off the board. I got to get my Cole Kmet. I got to get my Greg Dulcich. Is that any different than rolling with a duo of Bellinger and Conklin, or what's the real difference there?
I think you have to ask yourself, hey, if this draft ends, am I going to regret missing or passing up that wide receiver that I would have for another 5 to 10 years versus that tight end that I might be a bit miserable after week 4? So be very careful. Buyer beware what you get stuck with, because you can't go back. It makes it very hard.
Yeah. So, okay. Now, if we want, I know, Mitch, we did. I think most of this was evergreen for the most part.
It was
right?
very good. I think it's a great time to go into individual players.
Now, let's end the episode. Some players that maybe I have 50 players, at least maybe 100 players in red or green. Mitch, you have one. Dan, I'm sure you'll name a few players that are too high or too low for you and why. But let me ask you guys a question, just because I thought of this while Dan was talking about some of the wide receivers. In an existing league, unfortunately, no other context because I don't want to make something up. Mitch, 12-team Superflex, 2 PPR for tight ends. Would you move Stephon Diggs for DJ Moore and Daniel Jones?
No, probably not.
You would.
Goodbye, Diggs. Goodbye. See you, Diggs.
I would move Diggs like that.
No,
Mitch already has 2 elite quarterbacks.
I know. I don't need Daniel Jones on my team. I'm already set with Herbert and Burrow, so I'm okay.
All right, Diggs. Okay, how about Diggs?
You're cheating. This is so much cheating to go off the ADP.
Listen, Diggs or Kupp and Derrick Henry.
Kupp and Derrick Henry.
Smash it.
See, this is why you trade down, is what John's saying.
But that would have been, based on the information we have, a mid-3rd for a mid-5th and a mid-7th. Could it get done? I think in certain situations, maybe that's a little overzealous, but the point still stands. Once you get outside of, especially that first round, maybe early to mid-2nd, I'm doing everything in my power to move back. So since I have so many, can I just rattle off some players?
You do you, John.
I'm going to.
Before you rattle, I just want to say, so you're selling me here, John. And Mitch is seeing it there. I like that. That's why you trade down. And I know Kevin had the one comment, wide receivers are deep. I feel like taking any non-JJ or Chase wide receiver in the first 2 rounds is a mistake. So to your point, JB, is let's just say JJ, Chase, CD Lamb. They are 3 receivers that I am not passing up. I am not trading down, John. I'm not letting those guys slip. But once those 3 guys are gone, then I'm going with your theory. Is that where you're at, JB? Would you trade down? You wouldn't lose, because Diggs, okay, Diggs is aging a little bit. I would love to have Diggs, but I would trade down for any of those scenarios that you name. But if I could get one of those elite guys, I think it's a different story.
Now, if we're talking about early to mid-2nd, where CeeDee Lamb's going in that mid-2nd range right now, I'm going to need a solid return. I'm not just moving it to move the pick, but he's one that kind of lines up with value for me. AJ Brown, I think he's pretty in line. You'll see. I don't have any receiver until we get to Chris Olave in the 4th in startup data in red or green. So I see the way these drafts have gone being consistent with the way I would approach and value these wide receivers.
I like that. So you keep your strategy, but the price would be higher. Because you're losing the Lambs. And I say that for our listeners, just to have, know where that slot is, that range.
Yeah, don't be a sheep. Don't give Lamb away. Do you like that? Mitch isn't even listening.
I'm
Mitch is the.
I'm
Listen,
looking at all the players you have, and I'm like, I think I agree with most of them.
No. You know what Mitch is thinking about, Dan? I looked in his eyes and I saw the beach and a margarita. I saw that.
Yeah,
in his eyes.
that's been for a week now.
Are you like the tough guy, beer guy, or do you go into the fruity drinks when you're
Oh,
on
100%
vacation?
fruity drinks, because honestly,
you have to.
For anyone who ever goes to Cancun, the beer there is a little bit warm. Like, you just can't get it cold. It doesn't stay cold. So I would love to only drink beer because I'd prefer it. But I mean, it's gross.
What's your choice? This is going to surprise some people because I do come across as the big tough guy of the group.
Yeah.
But I love a strawberry daiquiri. And if you want to throw whipped cream and an umbrella on top, I'm not going to argue.
Give me a margarita, man. Just margarita. I'm good.
Okay. Margaritas are fine.
They're compelling stuff out here on Dynasty Theory tonight.
I'll be the beer guy on the side while you guys drink the pretty drinks. All right.
That's fine. That's the only issue.
Don't bring his own beer to the all-inclusive.
Oh yeah. The only
I'll
issue
bring my
is
koozie there. Keep it cold.
At my older age, all that sugar, it does get to the old stomach, eventually. So we won't go into too many details there. Only on Dynasty Theory, where John talks about bowel movements. All right. So
TMI. Where were we?
I get yelled at no matter what. Okay. So these are guys based on where they're going or picks that I think are slightly overvalued in startups. Kyler Murray, rookie 102, rookie 103, Trey Lance. Forget about Kirk Cousins here because in the one draft, he went super early.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's indicative of market. Najee Harris, George Kittle.
Not Najee Harris. You should be ashamed. Your sister works for the Steelers. This is not good for the Bauer business here. She's going to be calling it. She's going to listen to this episode because you mentioned the shout out in the beginning, and then you dog her organization that she's employed by. So I just want you to be a little more mindful of your sister. That's all.
I apologize, but still, Harris makes my list. George Kittle, Derek Carr, Kenny Pickett, Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Pierce, Rashad White, David Njoku, Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet, Greg Dulcich, Darren Waller, Desmond Ritter, my boy, the sexy man, Jimmy Garoppolo, Elijah Moore, Antonio Gibson, Calvin Ridley, Donovan Peoples-Jones. That is it through 11. Oh, no, Malik Willis, Al-Lazar, Chase Claypool, Kate Otten.
No, my Lord.
Rashad White started listening to our show again after you did the solo pod with him, and now he's going to stop listening again because you put him on the red flag list. But what did Ramondre Stevenson ever do to you? I'm going to disagree with that one there. In the 6th round, I would love to get Ramondre Stevenson. I think he got out, he got worked a little too hard this year, and that workload was a little adjustment for him, and Harris was out, but he has stud written all over him to me.
He is no different than looking at like a Damian Pierce or Rashad White. The question marks surround. Listen, the question marks surrounding.
You're comparing him to Damian Pierce.
The question marks surrounding the situation in 23, not even beyond. We're not even going out and looking years ahead. We're looking at
around Ramondre. There's no questions around Ramondre. The guy's a stud. He catches, he runs, he scores. He just got to stay healthy. And New England should be a little bit better next year once they get this offensive coordinator situation squared away, John. I'm a little sensitive to Ramondre.
With how many running backs are out there, and I don't know that the Patriots go the veteran running back route via free agency, but with how deep this rookie class is, you don't think they look to add to that group? You think they're going to run with Ramondre, Kevin Harris, and
who's Kevin Harris? JB, this is the 6th round. We're following Mitch's strategy. We've locked up our quarterbacks. We've locked up a tight end. We got an elite receiver in there. I don't want to slide too much on running backs here. I need an anchor. I need a bell cow. 6th round.
Ramondre is not your anchor.
If
he's your anchor, your ship is getting lost at sea.
He could be. Hey, last year when I slid and took Jacobs, Miles, CEH, it worked out good 2 out of 3, especially with Jacobs. Ramondre could be in that class. 6th round, still good value.
The only thing that I want to happen now, just thinking through this, I want Jamal Williams to sign with the Patriots just so he could talk about anime right next to Belichick, doing his it's football. Yep. We play it.
Come on, you're a Lions fan. You can't lose him. He's coming back.
So
he's happy.
Ramondre is going back to back with the rookie 108. Give me the 108. At cost, give me Dalvin Cook over Ramondre. Mm-hmm. Give me Terry McLaurin. Give me Deontay Johnson.
Hey, stop saying these players are part of my take. Come on, John.
So, all right. Overall, Mitch, good list, JB.
Yep. It's a great list. I just really quick. That's my
my other
catchphrase. Let me shed some light on my thoughts on the 102 and 103 being slightly overvalued. They're going in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
The 104 is going at the end of the third, beginning of the fourth. There should not be that much separation because you're either getting one of the top two quarterbacks or you're getting my running back 2, Jahmyr Gibbs. And I don't think there should be that much separation between the 102, 103, and 104. And you're kind of, if you take the 102, and in that situation, because you have the flexibility with the pick, right? And you could go any direction. If you go Gibbs, you're taking Gibbs as the running back 4 in Dynasty. That's a smidge too early for me. If you go quarterback, you are taking with your second round pick a massive unknown at the quarterback position when we see how these guys, Mitch, you mentioned it, that top 10, it's a tough top 10 to crack. And can Bryce Young and CJ Stroud after year one stay there? Could they get there? Sure, it is a possibility. But there's a good chance and too much risk associated with either that I want to be stuck going QB there, especially if I went quarterback in the first and then faded it because I know I have that 102 come time the rookie draft. So I just think it's unnecessary risk to go 102 there, especially big brain move. If I'm thinking about taking the rookie 102 in the middle of the second, move back around, see what you can get, and then maybe you get the 104 in the middle of the third, and you picked up value when they're in the same tier.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. All right. So mine's going to be pretty quick, slightly quicker than John's quick note there. But so I'm just saying, so Treylon Burks and George Pickens are going really close to like the 5th to the 6th round. I think wide receivers like that are just massively overvalued because they didn't show a lot on the field, but they had enough highlights. So like their fans love them, right? So whoever likes them ends up being like, this next year is going to be the year. This is the Rashad Bateman that I did last year. But the reason why I mention them is look at the wide receivers that are going after him. You have DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, who is a better wide receiver than George Pickens, is going after George Pickens, and he's the better wide receiver on their team. It's
Deebo Samuel is going after Treylon Burks.
I was just going to mention that. I mean, this is what happens. We get these young guys, and we're like, hey, they're going to be really good. They're young. They just didn't see their full potential. We have guys that are at their full potential already going right after them. So it's one thing to go for Chris Olave. Chris Olave is amazing. He showed he's amazing. Burks and Pickens kind of showed they might be, but we have no idea if they actually are. So for me, those are the kind of wide receivers that I'm heavily against drafting in the 5th, the 6th. We get in the 7th, the 8th, sure, I might take a shot, but those 5th and 6th rounds are still money.
I can see that. And also we're looking at those wide receivers that we talk about it. They have the insulated value. And as long as they're somewhat productive with what a number of games they play, Treylon Burks obviously went through some injuries there, but if they're somewhat productive, they're going to maintain their value. But at the end of the day, are they any type of a difference maker? Are they really helping you win? Probably not. All right. So Dan,
3 guys I don't like, and I think I have 5 guys I like. So a little rapid fire. Don't like Watson in the first round. Deshaun Watson, it's just a little rich. Kyle Pitts, surprisingly, in the second round. I just feel a little rich right now. I'll give the why of my third one here in the final thoughts. Austin Eckler in the second round. I think I'm ready to slide him, and I'll explain that then. Guys I do like, or I say I'm at least intrigued by right now, was Saquon Barkley in the 4th round. I just really love watching him run right now and knowing what he can do and his ceiling. In the 9th round, Brandon Ayuk. I just kind of get this vibe that he's Mr. Disrespected, and there's always going to be these young guys that are going a couple rounds before him. And, the only concern there is a little bit of passing volume, but I just love the talent. Tight ends, just seeing some of the guys I like, or certain guys either maybe go too early. Not even going to try to pronounce his name, but Chig there of the
Chiggy
in the 14th round's a little intriguing. John Mechie in the 15th round at wide receiver. He's a guy I've just been kind of trying to snag here and there. And boy, if I can get him that late, I just really like his upside. But I may be compelled a little bit more by his story. So we'll see how that evolves in the offseason. And then, I've always liked them. 16th round value, Damian Harris. I'm really interested to see where he goes this offseason. I think I would just roll the dice that late and hope he lands a good gig or more of an opportunity. So they're guys I like.
Guys I like at the current cost very quickly. Travis Etienne, Chris Olave.
He's got more?
We talked about Jacobs, Devontae Smith, rookie 108, Christian Watson, which is shocking to me.
I didn't name him because you highlighted him. I love that. I like that one.
Hollywood Brown. You know it, Mitch. Christian Kirk. Jared Goff, Tony Pollard, Jerry Jeudy, Jahan Dotson, Miles Sanders, rookie 201, rookie 202, rookie 204. John, what about the 203? That's fine where it is. Mike Williams, Brian Robinson also makes me sick. Keenan Allen, he's going in the 12th right now. Guess what? Barring something crazy, we know exactly what Keenan Allen is going to be come September. All right.
Broken.
Oh, please. His value, it should not be in the 12th round. And also, you think about it in terms of picks, he's going right around the 206, 207, probably fair. But let's say players go out during the combine and they do not perform. Let's say the NFL draft rolls around and draft capital slips, landing spots are horrific. We get negative reports throughout training camp. Oh, it could happen. Even to this precious 23 class, it could happen. Then we see how Keenan Allen changes. In the 13th round, give me Tom Brady.
Yep.
Give me him over Malik Willis. They're both going there. So just several guys. But then one other thing I want to note is the way early off-season startups like November, early December versus late December and current players who are going higher now in the startups we've seen. And it makes sense. Think about these players. Cam Akers, he's started to really come on towards the end of the season. Jahan Dotson, players that haven't performed. Sorry, I'm scratching my leg over here. Well, I was pausing,
keep going.
Players that haven't performed, but we're looking ahead to next year because it is a startup. Russell Wilson is one of the biggest risers in these startups. Okay. AJ Dillon, Cooper Kupp, Noah Fant, James Cook. What?
John's listening to the whole list, the whole spreadsheet.
No. Every player that's in it, I'm going to mention all of them.
I have just mentioned every single player in the NFL, Canadian Football League, and the soon to be renewed XFL. No, I'm naming the players.
Sample size, mind you.
I'm naming the players. Shut up! I hate both of you. I'm naming the players.
Yes, you are.
Who have risen, and it makes sense as to those types of players. Okay, you know what? I don't need this right now. Okay.
Final thoughts.
All right, for the 189th time, Dan, what do you got for our listeners? Final thoughts.
I will be quick after your 100 names you listed, JB. Hey, coaches changes are beginning. We're seeing some guys get canned. My first quick observation is the Los Angeles Chargers. Somehow Brandon Staley looks like he survived, and they're an organization that's picking to choose the blame on saying, hey, Coach, we're going to give you another year, and you're going to throw one of your coordinators under the bus. So Joe Lombardi's out of here, which I get because it's been 2 years of Justin Herbert underachieving. But I'm just it's growing old on me, Coach Staley, and his excuses and reasons why. But I think they are one player that might salvage his job, and that is Bijan Robinson at pick 21. Let's start a little early draft speculation here, all right?
That would make me sick. Take it back.
You look at like Dallas, how they – and Zeke's lost a step, but he gets those dirty yards, and Pollard's the guy. Like Eckler's the guy, and I love him, but man, he couldn't run a lick in that game because he can't pound the rock. You throw Robinson in there and that nice 1-2 punch, maybe it buys Staley a time despite his bad decision making. We'll see. So I'm really intrigued as the coaching situations are going, but I think they trade up for Bijan or they bust again is my bold prediction in 2023. Sorry, Justin Herbert owners, but this could be another long year for the Chargers.
Well, aren't you just a glass half full kind of guy? You're a glass half full kind of guy. Mitch,
Yep.
before your big sign off,
Oh, no.
and
Okay.
we bid you adieu to I almost said Cancun. What do you got for our
Flashbacks.
listeners?
So 2 quick things. If you do plan on trading your future picks, offer it to every single person in the league. If you want to trade your 24 first, offer it for every single 6th round pick. I really love doing that. It works out pretty well. And then my other thing that completely random, but during the Manning cast last night, I thought it was very funny that Manning was like, Peyton was saying that halftime adjustments aren't a real thing. He's like, it's the biggest myth in football. There's no halftime adjustments. You go in there, use the restroom, sometimes change into a different jersey, and then you'll eat like an orange, and then you're back out there on the field. So like halftime adjustments aren't a real thing. And I was like, wow, how about that? Who knew?
A little overrated, maybe, but there are halftime adjustments.
No, he
but-
called them a myth. That's all that I know.
I don't know about that.
Speaking of, you talk about orange at halftime. For my high school soccer team, I was the goalie, so I didn't really have to. No, I didn't have to run. No joke. On multiple occasions during halftime, I raced up to the concession stand to get nachos or pretzel with cheese, and I would eat it at halftime. And I'll tell you right now, I came back stronger than ever in the second half.
Good for you. Good for you.
No, again, I was the
kids.
goalie.
Do not try that at home.
No nachos, no pretzels with cheese at halftime. Stick to the oranges. All right. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the show. A lot of startup conversations are going to be taking place in our Discord and the Patreon throughout the entire off season. A lot of great content, a lot of great discussions. We have the startup tiers. We have all the rookie data. I now have 28 rookie running backs in my running back analytical profile spreadsheet. Mitch, you're still diving into film. I know you're going to be doing that a lot when you're in Cancun. It's going to be a blast. All right. For Mitch Sorensen, Dan Lamagna, I'm John Bauer. We will see you guys next week, except for Mitch. He will be enjoying that margarita. Have a great night.